The Aegis drifted silently through the void, its cloaking technology rendering it nearly invisible to the prying sensors of the Vorthax. The crew worked tirelessly, their movements sharp and efficient as they navigated the treacherous expanse of enemy territory. Every jump brought them closer to their destination, but also deeper into danger. The tension aboard the ship was palpable, a constant hum of anxiety that lingered in the corridors and echoed in the quiet moments between tasks. Ethan Carter stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the monitors displaying their surroundings. Though the screens showed nothing but empty space, he knew better than to trust appearances. The Vorthax were masters of stealth and deception, their ships capable of appearing without warning. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. What if they were already being tracked? What if the scouts' coordinates had been bait to lure them into a trap? He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing instead on the mission at hand. Doubt could wait. Survival came first. Rachel Monroe paced nearby, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had never been one to sit idly by, especially not when so much was at stake. Her gaze flicked between the navigation console and the sensor displays, searching for any sign of trouble. "How are we looking?" she asked Jake Thompson, who sat hunched over his station, his fingers flying across the controls. Jake glanced up briefly before returning his attention to the screen. "Clear for now," he replied, though his tone carried a hint of uncertainty. "But we're about to enter that bottleneck you pointed out earlier. If anything's going to go wrong, it'll probably happen there." Rachel nodded grimly, stepping closer to examine the readouts herself. The section ahead was densely packed with Vorthax activity, a swirling mass of energy signatures that indicated patrols and supply lines. It was the kind of area where even the slightest mistake could mean disaster. She turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. "You think we can make it through without being detected?" "We have to," Ethan said simply. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a quiet intensity that betrayed the weight of his responsibility. Dr. Bennett's upgrades should keep us hidden, but everyone needs to stay alert. One wrong move and we're done. Laura Bennett hovered near the engineering station, monitoring the ship's systems with hawk-like precision. Her cloaking modifications had been tested extensively, but this was uncharted territory. The Vorthax were unpredictable, and their technology far surpassed anything humanity had encountered before. Still, Laura refused to let doubt creep in. She adjusted a few settings on her console, ensuring the energy output remained within acceptable levels. "Cloaking is holding steady," she reported, glancing at Ethan. "But I recommend keeping our speed low. Any sudden bursts could give us away." "Understood," Ethan replied, relaying the order to the helm. "Keep us slow and steady. We're not in a rush." As the Aegis approached the bottleneck, the atmosphere aboard the ship grew heavier. Conversations ceased, replaced by the soft hum of machinery and the occasional beep of a console. Every member of the crew held their breath, waiting for the inevitable moment when they would pass closest to the Vorthax forces. Even Jake, usually so confident in his abilities, felt a knot of unease twisting in his stomach. He double-checked, the course making minute adjustments to ensure they stayed clear of the most active zones. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Then, just as they entered the heart of the bottleneck, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red lights flashed on the bridge, bathing the room in an ominous glow. Ethan sprang into action, his voice cutting through the chaos. "What's happening?" "It's the cloaking system," Laura shouted, her hands flying over her console. "There's a fluctuation in the energy field. They might have detected us." Rachel moved quickly to the sensor station, scanning the surrounding area. "I'm picking up movement, 3 Vorthax cruisers heading our way." Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. They were outnumbered and outgunned with no room to maneuver. "Shut down all non-essential systems," he ordered. "Divert power to the cloak and engines. We need to get out of here now." The crew scrambled to comply, their training kicking in despite the panic. Laura worked furiously to stabilize the cloaking field, sweat beading on her forehead as she fought to contain the fluctuation. "I've almost got it," she muttered, under her breath. "Just a little more." Outside, the Vorthax cruisers closed in, their massive forms looming ominously against the backdrop of stars. Their weapons charged, ready to unleash devastating firepower at the slightest provocation. On the bridge, the tension was unbearable. Ethan gripped the railing, his knuckles white as he watched the enemy ships draw nearer. Then, just as it seemed, all hope was lost. The alarms fell silent. Laura let out a shaky breath, slumping back in her chair. "Got it," she announced, her voice trembling with relief. "The cloaking field is stable again." "Good work," Ethan said, his tone measured but filled with gratitude. "Now let's get moving before they realize we're still here." Jake wasted no time, plotting a new course that would take them away from the cruisers. His hands trembled slightly as he input the commands, but he forced himself to focus. This wasn't the time for mistakes. The Aegis accelerated cautiously, slipping past the Vorthax ships without incident. For several agonizing minutes, the crew waited, holding their collective breath as they moved further away from danger. When they finally emerged on the other side of the bottleneck, the relief was overwhelming. Cheers erupted across the ship, though they were muted by exhaustion. Ethan allowed himself a brief smile, though his expression quickly sobered. "Good job, everyone," he said, addressing the crew. "But we're not out of the woods yet. Stay sharp. We still have a long way to go." Rachel approached him afterward, her face pale but resolute. "That was too close," she murmured. "We can't afford another slip-up like that." "I know," Ethan replied, his voice heavy with concern. "But we made it through. That's what matters right now." Despite the narrow escape, the Gaite encounter left its mark on the crew. Jake, in particular, struggled to shake off the guilt of nearly exposing them. He replayed the moment in his mind, wondering if he could have done something differently. Had he miscalculated the course? Missed a critical detail? The questions gnawed at him, threatening to undermine his confidence. Laura noticed his distress and pulled him aside later that evening. "Hey," she said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" Jake hesitated, avoiding her gaze. "I almost got us killed back there," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "If it weren't for Dr. Bennett—" "Stop," Laura interrupted firmly. "You did your job and you did it well. Mistakes happen, especially in situations like this. What matters is how we learn from them. You kept your cool under pressure, and that's what saved us." Her words offered some comfort, though Jake still couldn't fully forgive himself. He nodded slowly, forcing a weak smile. "Thanks, Dr. Bennett. I'll do better next time." "You already are," she assured him, giving his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Now get some rest. We're going to need you at your best." As the Aegis continued its journey, the crew took stock of their situation. They had survived the bottleneck, but the experience served as a stark reminder of the dangers they faced. Each member of the team carried their own burdens: the weight of loss, the fear of failure, the responsibility of protecting what little remained of humanity. Yet amid the hardship, a sense of camaraderie began to grow. They were no longer just individuals working toward a common goal. They were a family, bound together by shared struggles and unwavering determination. Days passed, and the Aegis encountered remnants of human outposts along the way. Some were mere husks, their structures reduced to rubble by Vorthax attacks. Others bore signs of desperate last stands, with skeletal remains scattered among shattered defenses. Each site reinforced the grim reality of their mission, but it also fueled their resolve to reach the mysterious planet. Ethan often found himself reflecting on these encounters, haunted by the faces of those who hadn't survived. He thought about the families torn apart, the dreams extinguished, the lives cut short. And yet he reminded himself of the hope that drove them forward, the belief that humanity could rise again, stronger and more resilient than ever. One evening, as the ship drifted quietly through the darkness, Rachel joined Ethan on the observation deck. The view outside was breathtaking. Countless stars stretched endlessly in every direction, their light piercing the void like tiny beacons of possibility. Do you ever wonder if we're chasing a ghost? She asked softly, breaking the silence. Ethan turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. Sometimes, he admitted. But even if this planet turns out to be nothing more than a myth, it doesn't change the fact that we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. Hope isn't always about finding answers, it's about believing they exist. Rachel nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the stars. I guess that's why we keep going, she said after a pause. Because giving up means losing everything. Exactly. Ethan agreed, offering her a small smile. And as long as we're still breathing, we haven't lost yet. With renewed determination, the crew pressed onward, their spirits bolstered by the faint glimmer of hope that guided them through the way. Darkness. The mysterious planet lay just beyond the horizon. The Aegis hurtled through the vast emptiness of space, its engines humming with a steady rhythm that filled the silence between stars. The coordinates provided by the dying scout had led them to a region of the galaxy few humans dared to venture into, a stretch of territory firmly under Vorthak's control. Every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to their destination, but it also heightened the tension aboard the ship. The crew moved with purpose, their steps quick and deliberate, as if trying to outrun the dread that lingered in the air. Ethan Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the swirling blue vortex of hyperspace outside the viewport. His hands rested, lightly on the railing, his fingers tapping absent-mindedly against the cool metal. He wasn't just thinking about the mission ahead, he was reflecting on everything that had brought them to this point. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on him, though he rarely let it show. Each decision he made carried consequences, not just for himself or his crew, but for all of humanity. If they failed, there would be no one left to pick up the pieces. Rachel. Monroe approached quietly, her boots making soft sounds against the deck. She paused beside Ethan, following his gaze toward the endless expanse beyond the ship. Do you think we're doing the right thing? She asked after a moment, her voice low enough not to draw attention from the rest of the crew. Her question wasn't accusatory, merely curious, an attempt to understand the reasoning behind Ethan's choices. Ethan turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. I don't know, he admitted honestly. But I do know that sitting back and waiting for the end isn't an option. We have to try, Rachel, for everyone who's counting on us. Rachel exhaled slowly, her arms crossing over her chest. I get that. I really do. But sometimes I wonder if hope is more dangerous than despair. What happens if this planet turns out to be another dead end? Or worse? What if it's a trap? Her concerns were valid, and Ethan didn't dismiss them outright. Instead, he nodded, acknowledging the risks. You're right. It could be either of those things, but we can't afford to assume the worst without even trying. If this is our last shot, then we owe it to ourselves, and to future generations, to take it. Rachel fell silent, her jaw tightening slightly. She wanted to argue further, to convince Ethan that caution might be wiser than blind optimism. Yet deep down, she knew he was right. Hope, however fragile, was the only thing keeping them going. Without it, they'd already lost. Still, the nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach refused to go away. Something about the scout's discovery felt off, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Meanwhile, Jake Thompson sat in the navigation bay, poring over star charts and plotting their course. Despite his youth, Jake took his role seriously, knowing that even the smallest error could spell disaster. The Vorthaks were notorious for their advanced detection systems, and sneaking past their patrols required precision and timing. Jake's brow furrowed in concentration as he adjusted the trajectory, ensuring the Aegis stayed clear of known enemy routes. Dr. Laura Bennett entered the room, carrying a data pad filled with notes. She glanced at Jake briefly before taking a seat nearby. How's it coming along? She asked, her tone casual but tinged with curiosity. Jake looked up, offering a small smile. It's going okay. Just tweaking the route a bit to avoid some heavy traffic zones. I don't want to give the Vorthaks any reason to notice us. Laura nodded approvingly. Good thinking. We'll need all the stealth we can get. She hesitated for a moment, then added, "Have you thought about what we'll do once we reach the planet? Assuming it's real, of course." Jake shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "Not really. I guess we'll figure it out when we get there. One step at a time, right?" Laura chuckled softly. "That's true. Still, it's hard not to imagine what it'll be like. A whole new world, untouched by the Vorthax. It almost feels too good to be true." Jake's expression darkened slightly. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. What if it's not as perfect as it seems? What if we're walking into something we're not ready for?" Laura tilted her head, considering his words. "Well, we won't know until we get there. But whatever happens, we'll face it together. That's what makes us strong, isn't it?" Jake nodded, though his unease remained. He appreciated Laura's optimism, but experience had taught him that trust came at a cost. The universe rarely handed out gifts without strings attached. Back on the bridge, Ethan called for a meeting with the senior staff. As the crew gathered around the central table, he projected a holographic map of their intended route. Red markers indicated areas of high Vorthax activity, while green highlighted potential safe zones. "This is our path," Ethan explained, pointing to the winding line that connected their current position to the mysterious planet. "We'll need to stick to the edges of their territory as much as possible. Any deviation could alert them to our presence." Rachel studied the map carefully, her eyes narrowing as she spotted a cluster of red markers near the midpoint. "What about this section?" she asked, tapping the area. "It looks like a bottleneck. If we're caught here, we won't have anywhere to run." Ethan nodded grimly. "That's the most dangerous part of the journey. We'll have to move quickly and rely on our cloaking technology to get through. Dr. Bennett, how confident are you in the upgrades?" Laura straightened, meeting Ethan's gaze. "The modifications should hold up, but there's always a risk. If they detect even a faint energy signature, we're done for." "Understood," Ethan said, turning back to the group. "We'll prepare for every contingency. Everyone needs to be ready to act at a moment's notice. This isn't just another mission. It's our best chance at survival." The gravity of his words settled over the room, leaving the crew quiet and contemplative. They all knew the stakes, but hearing them spoken aloud made the reality sink in even deeper. Failure wasn't an option, yet success seemed impossibly distant. As the meeting concluded, Rachel pulled Ethan aside once more. "There's something else," she began hesitantly. "I've been reviewing the data from the scout ship. Some of it doesn't add up." Ethan frowned. His interest piqued. "What do you mean?" Rachel handed him a tablet displaying a series of encrypted files. "These readings, the ones about the planet's atmosphere, they seem inconsistent, almost like they were altered after the fact. And there's no record of the scout ship sending any kind of distress signal before reaching us. Doesn't that strike you as odd?" Ethan studied the information, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. "You think the scout might have been compromised?" "It's possible," Rachel admitted, "or maybe whoever sent the data wanted us to find it. Either way, we need to proceed with caution. If this is a trap, we can't afford to walk into it blindly." Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're right. We'll keep your concerns in mind moving forward. But for now, we press on. We don't have the luxury of second-guessing every lead." Rachel nodded reluctantly, understanding his reasoning even if she didn't fully agree. "Just promise me one thing," she said softly. "Don't let hope cloud your judgment. We've come too far to make reckless decisions now." "I won't," Ethan assured her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll stay vigilant. Together we'll see this through." With that, the two returned to their duties, each carrying the burden of uncertainty. The crew of the Aegis continued, preparing for the challenges ahead, their movements synchronized like clockwork. Supplies were double-checked, weapons calibrated, and escape protocols reviewed. Every detail mattered, no matter how small. As the hours ticked by, the tension aboard the ship grew palpable. Conversations became shorter, laughter rarer. Even the hum of the engine seemed louder, as if echoing the unease that permeated the corridors. Yet amid the anxiety, a spark of determination burned brightly. These men and women weren't just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for everyone who had ever dreamed of a better future. When the Aegis finally dropped out of hyperspace near the edge of Vorthax territory, the crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. The view outside the viewport revealed a stark contrast. Barren wastelands littered with the remnants of conquered planets, their surfaces scarred by the relentless harvesting of resources. It was a grim reminder of what awaited humanity if they failed. Ethan addressed the crew over the intercom, his voice steady and firm. "This is it," he said. "We're entering hostile territory, and the next few days will test us in ways we can't predict. But remember this, we've faced impossible odds before, and we've always found a way to persevere. Keep your heads up, stay sharp, and trust in each other. Together, we'll make it through." His words resonated throughout the ship, bolstering morale and reinforcing their resolve. Though fear lingered in the shadows, it was tempered by a shared sense of purpose. The Aegis slipped silently into the darkness, its crew united by a single goal: to find hope where none seemed to exist. In the year 2247, Earth was no longer the vibrant blue and green jewel it had once been. Centuries of overuse, pollution, and relentless expansion into space had left its surface scarred and barren. Humanity had reached for the stars with dreams of prosperity, but those dreams were now overshadowed by a grim reality. The galaxy was not empty. It was filled with dangers far greater than anyone could have imagined. Among these dangers stood the Vorthax, a terrifying alien species that operated as a single collective mind. Their goal was simple yet devastating: consume every resource they encountered, leaving behind lifeless husks of planets. The Vorthax had arrived without warning decades earlier, their massive ships blotting out the suns of countless systems. They did not negotiate, nor did they seek peace. Instead, they attacked with brutal efficiency, harvesting entire worlds until nothing remained. At first, humanity fought back fiercely, driven by desperation and hope. But as time passed, the tide turned against them. Colony after colony fell to the relentless onslaught. Entire fleets were wiped out in battles that seemed unwinnable. Morale plummeted and despair settled like a thick fog over what little remained of human civilization. Amidst this chaos, one man continued to fight despite the odds. His name was Ethan Carter, a captain whose face bore the weight of countless battles. He wasn't the youngest or the strongest leader, but his determination made him stand out. Ethan had spent most of his adult life commanding starships, and he carried the scars, both physical and emotional, of every skirmish he'd endured. His eyes, once bright with optimism, now reflected the weariness of someone who had seen too much death. Yet beneath that exhaustion burned a stubborn flame, a refusal to give up even when all signs pointed to failure. Ethan's ship, the Aegis, was one of the last vessels still operational in the human fleet. It wasn't the largest or most advanced starship, but it was sturdy and reliable, much like its crew. These men and women weren't heroes plucked from legend. They were ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Each of them had lost something or someone to the Vorthax. Some had watched their families die during invasions, while others had seen their homeworlds reduced to ash. But instead of succumbing to grief, they chose to keep fighting, clinging to the faintest glimmer of hope. Rachel Monroe, Ethan's second-in-command, was perhaps the most vocal about the futility of their efforts. She was sharp-witted and pragmatic, often serving as the voice of reason aboard the Aegis. Rachel had grown up on Mars, where she'd witnessed the horrors of the Vorthax firsthand. Her parents had been among the first casualties when the aliens invaded, and though she rarely spoke of it, the pain of that loss lingered. Despite her skepticism, Rachel remained loyal to Ethan, trusting his judgment even when she didn't agree with it. She knew better than anyone how hard it was to lead in times like these, and she respected Ethan for shouldering that burden day after day. The crew of the Aegis numbered fewer than 50, a fraction of what it used to be. Many of them were young, barely out of training, while others were seasoned veterans who had seen too many comrades fall. Among them was Jake Thompson, a navigator barely in his 20s. Jake had joined the military straight out of high school, eager to prove himself. He idolized Ethan, seeing him as the kind of leader he hoped to become someday. But the realities of war had quickly stripped away his naivety, replacing it with a quiet determination to survive. Dr. Laura Bennett rounded out the core team. A scientist specializing in advanced technologies, Laura was responsible for keeping the Aegis running smoothly. Her expertise extended beyond repairs, however. She was also tasked with analyzing any alien artifacts or data recovered during missions. Laura believed that understanding the enemy's technology might hold the key to victory, though she often clashed with Ethan over how much risk was acceptable in pursuit of that knowledge. Still, her brilliance earned her respect, even if her ideas sometimes pushed boundaries. For months, the Aegis had been operating on the fringes of known space, conducting hit-and-run attacks against Vorthax supply lines. These small victories brought little comfort, but they kept the crew busy and gave them a sense of purpose. That changed one evening when a battered scout ship limped into range, its hull scorched and leaking atmosphere. Ethan ordered the Aegis to intercept, fearing the worst. When the scout ship docked, its sole survivor staggered onto the bridge, clutching a data pad in trembling hands. "Captain, I found it," the scout gasped before collapsing. Medics rushed to stabilize him, but his words sent ripples through the crew. "Found what?" Ethan wasted no time retrieving the data pad and reviewing its contents. What he discovered was both astonishing and terrifying. The scout claimed to have located a habitable planet deep within Vorthax territory, a place untouched by the invaders. According to the coordinates, this world offered everything humanity needed to rebuild: fertile soil, clean water, and breathable air. It sounded too good to be true, yet the data appeared genuine. News of the discovery spread quickly, igniting a mix of excitement and apprehension among the crew. For some, it represented a chance at salvation, a new beginning far from the horrors they'd endured. For others, it felt like a cruel joke, another false hope destined to crumble under the weight of reality. Rachel voiced her concerns openly, questioning whether venturing so deep into enemy territory was worth the risk. "We're already stretched thin, Ethan," she argued. "If we lose the Aegis, there won't be anything left." Ethan listened patiently, knowing Rachel's doubts came from a place of care rather than cowardice. "I understand your fears," he replied calmly, "but if we don't take this chance, what do we have left, sitting here waiting for the end?" He paused, looking around at the faces of his crew. "This isn't just about us. It's about everyone who's counting on us to find a way forward. We owe it to them to try." His words struck a chord, silencing even the most skeptical voices. Slowly, the crew began preparing for the perilous journey ahead. Supplies were rationed, weapons checked, and engines tuned to ensure maximum performance. Everyone understood the stakes. Success meant survival, while failure likely meant extinction. As the Aegis set course for the mysterious planet, a fragile sense of hope took root aboard the ship. It was a feeling none of them had allowed themselves to indulge in for years, and though it was tinged with uncertainty, it provided a spark of light in an otherwise dark universe. The voyage promised to be long and treacherous, requiring them to navigate through densely patrolled Vorthax territory. Every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to their destination, and closer to potential disaster. Yet despite the looming danger, the crew worked together with renewed vigor, united by the possibility of a brighter future. Ethan watched them closely, taking pride in their resilience. He knew the road ahead would test them in ways they couldn't imagine, but he also knew one thing for certain: as long as there were people willing to fight for tomorrow, humanity still had a chance. As the Aegis continued its perilous journey, the crew began to notice subtle changes in their surroundings. The once barren and lifeless expanse of space started to give way to faint traces of distant stars and swirling nebulae. It was as if they were leaving behind the desolation wrought by the Vorthax and moving toward something untouched, pristine. The sight brought a flicker of optimism to the weary faces aboard the ship, though no one dared to voice it aloud. Hope was a fragile thing, and they had learned the hard way not to cling to it too tightly. Dr. Laura Bennett spent much of her time analyzing the fragmentary data recovered from the dying scout ship. She worked tirelessly in the lab, surrounded by glowing screens and scattered notes, piecing together clues that might reveal more about their destination. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she deciphered encrypted files and cross-referenced readings. Slowly but surely, patterns began to emerge, patterns that hinted at something far greater than anyone had anticipated. One evening, as the rest of the crew gathered for a rare moment of downtime in the mess hall, Laura approached Ethan Carter with an update. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, though she tempered her enthusiasm with caution. "I think I found something important," she said, handing him a tablet displaying her findings. Ethan took the device, scanning the information quickly. His expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief. "Are you saying this planet isn't just habitable, that it has ancient technology?" Laura nodded, her voice steady despite the weight of her revelation. "Yes. Based on the energy signatures and structural scans, it looks like there's evidence of some kind of advanced civilization. The Scouts' data suggests these ruins are still functional, or at least partially so." The implications of her discovery sent a ripple through the room. Ancient technology meant answers, possibly even solutions to humanity's struggles against the Vorthax. But it also raised questions. Who built it? Why did they leave? And most importantly, could humans harness it without triggering unforeseen consequences? Rachel Monroe listened intently, her arms crossed over her chest. Her skepticism returned, full force, overshadowing any initial excitement. "This sounds too good to be true," she muttered, glancing between Ethan and Laura. "Ancient tech doesn't just sit around waiting for us to stumble across it. There's always a catch." "You're right," Laura admitted, meeting Rachel's gaze. "But we can't ignore the possibility that this could change everything. If we can understand how this technology works, we might finally have a fighting chance against the Vorthax." Ethan weighed their words carefully, his mind racing with possibilities. He knew Rachel's concerns were valid. History was littered with examples of humanity rushing headlong into danger under the guise of progress. Yet he also recognized the potential here. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming control over their future. "We'll proceed with caution," he said firmly, addressing both women. "But we can't turn away from this opportunity either. Let's focus on gathering more intel when we arrive." The discussion ended there, but the tension lingered. The crew dispersed, each member lost in their own thoughts. Jake Thompson lingered near the corner of the mess hall, absently stirring a cup of lukewarm coffee. He had been quiet during the exchange, unsure of what to say. The idea of discovering alien ruins filled him with equal parts awe and dread. What if they weren't alone on that planet? What if whatever created the technology was still out there watching? Later that night, Jake sought out Laura in the lab. She was hunched over her workstation, typing furiously as lines of code scrolled across multiple screens. He cleared his throat softly to announce his presence. "Hey, Dr. Bennett," he began, hesitantly. "Can I ask you something?" Laura glanced up, pushing a strand of hair out of her face. "Of course, Jake. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Do you really think we'll be able to figure out how this tech works? I mean, it's ancient, right? What if we mess it up or activate something we shouldn't?" Laura smiled faintly, appreciating his honesty. "Those are valid concerns," she replied. "But remember, we're not going in blind. We'll take every precaution and we'll only move forward if we're absolutely sure it's safe. Besides, understanding alien technology is my specialty. If anyone can crack it, I can." Her confidence reassured him, though it didn't completely erase his unease. "Okay," he said after a pause. I don't want to make another mistake like before." Laura placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You didn't make a mistake, Jake. You did your best under impossible circumstances, and that's all anyone can ask for. Trust yourself, and trust the team. We've got your back." Jake nodded, feeling slightly better. He thanked her before heading back to his quarters, where he lay awake staring at the ceiling. Sleep eluded him as his mind replayed fragments of their journey. The close calls, the sacrifices, the endless uncertainty. Despite the risks, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. For the first time in weeks, hope stirred within him, fragile yet persistent. Meanwhile, Rachel paced the corridors of the EG, unable to settle. Her conversation with Laura replayed in her head, gnawing at her resolve. Ancient technology sounded promising, but it also carried inherent dangers. Humanity had a long history of misusing power, especially when desperation clouded judgment. Was this mission truly about salvation, or were they walking blindly into another catastrophe? She decided to review the scout ship's data herself, poring over the files late into the night. As she delved deeper, inconsistencies began to surface, subtle anomalies that hinted at tampering. Certain sections of the recordings seemed disjointed, as though edited posthumously. Other details contradicted earlier reports, raising red flags about the authenticity of the information. By morning, Rachel felt certain of one thing: someone had altered the data. Whether it was the scout himself or an outside influence remained unclear, but the implications were troubling. She confronted Ethan privately, sharing her findings. "I think we're being led somewhere," she said bluntly, spreading the evidence across the table. "Someone wants us to find this planet, and I'm not convinced it's for our benefit." Ethereal's jaw tightened as he studied the discrepancies. "You think it's a trap?" "It's possible," Rachel admitted. "Or maybe whoever sent this wanted us to believe it's real. Either way, we need to tread carefully. If we rush in expecting paradise, we might end up walking straight into disaster." Ethan absorbed her words, weighing them against the urgency of their mission. "Agreed," he said finally. "We'll stay vigilant. But unless we uncover concrete proof otherwise, we have to assume the planet exists. Hope may be risky, but giving up guarantees failure." Rachel sighed, knowing he was right. Still, she resolved to keep digging, determined to uncover the truth before they reached their destination. Time was running out, and every decision they made from here on would shape the fate of humanity. As the days passed, the Aegis drew closer to the coordinates. The crew prepared for landing protocols, checking equipment and running simulations. Conversations grew quieter, tinged with anticipation and apprehension. They were entering uncharted territory, stepping into the unknown with nothing but faith in each other to guide them. Finally, the planet came into view, a breathtaking sphere of vibrant greens and blues suspended against the blackness of space. Its surface shimmered with lush forests, sprawling oceans, and towering mountain ranges. It looked exactly like the haven described in the scouts' logs, almost impossibly perfect. The sight filled the bridge with stunned silence as the crew stared in awe. "Is that real?" Jake whispered, voicing what everyone else was thinking. Ethan allowed himself a brief smile, though his expression remained guarded. "Let's find out," he said, his tone steady. "Prepare for descent, we're going in." The Aegis descended cautiously, its systems scanning for signs of danger. So far, the planet appeared uninhabited, but the ruins mentioned in the data remained hidden beneath dense foliage and rugged terrain. Landing coordinates were set near a cluster of structures detected by the sensors, structures that matched the descriptions of the ancient civilization. As the ship touched down on the surface, the crew suited up, ready to explore. Ethan led the ground team, flanked by Rachel, Jake, and Laura. Their footsteps crunched softly against the soil as they stepped onto the alien world for the first time. The air smelled fresh, carrying hints of earth and vegetation. Birds, or creatures resembling birds, chirped in the distance, adding to the surreal sense of normalcy. Yet beneath the beauty lay an undeniable tension. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. The ruins loomed ahead, partially obscured by vines and moss. Strange symbols etched into the stone walls hinted at a culture long gone, their meanings lost to time. Laura examined the carvings closely, her eyes lighting up with fascination. "This is incredible," she murmured. "Whoever built this was centuries ahead of us. But as they ventured deeper, mechanical whirring broke the silence. From the shadows emerged drones, sleek metallic constructs that hovered menacingly. In the air, their red eyes glowed ominously, locking onto the intruders. Without warning, the drones opened fire, forcing the team to scatter. "Take cover!" Ethan shouted, drawing his weapon. The Aegis hummed quietly as the ground team returned, their faces etched with a mix of frustration and determination. The ambush by the mechanical drones had been unexpected, but it only deepened their resolve to uncover the truth about the planet. Ethan Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic display of the ruins they had barely escaped. His mind raced with questions. Who or what had built those defenses? Were they meant to protect something valuable, or were they traps designed to eliminate intruders? Rachel Monroe paced nearby, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had warned against rushing into the unknown, and now her concerns seemed justified. "This place isn't what we thought it was," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice carried a note of urgency. "Those drones weren't just random machines. They were guarding something important." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "You're right. But that doesn't change our mission. If there's tech down there capable of turning the tide against the Vorthax, we can't afford to walk away." Laura Bennett joined them, holding a fragment of one of the destroyed drones. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity as she examined the sleek metal piece. "These drones are powered by some kind of quantum energy source," she explained, placing the shard on the table for everyone to see. "It's unlike anything we've encountered before. If we can figure out how it works, we might be able to replicate it, or even use it against the Vorthax." Jake Thompson lingered near the edge of the group, still shaken from the encounter. He clenched his fists, replaying the moments when the drones had attacked. For a brief second, he had frozen, overwhelmed by fear. That hesitation haunted him now. "We almost didn't make it back," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "What happens next time?" "There won't be a next time if we don't learn from this," Ethan replied firmly, meeting Jake's gaze. "Mistakes happen, but we adapt. That's how we survive." Encouraged by Ethan's words, Jake straightened slightly, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. He knew the captain was right. They couldn't afford to let fear paralyze them. Still, the memory of the attack weighed heavily on his shoulders. Over the next few hours, Laura worked tirelessly in the lab, dissecting the drone fragment and analyzing its components. She ran countless tests, feeding data into the ship's computers and cross-referencing it with known technologies. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. The drone's power source wasn't just advanced, it was revolutionary. It operated on principles that defied conventional physics, harnessing energy in ways humanity had only dreamed of achieving. "This could be the breakthrough we need," Laura announced during a briefing later that evening. She projected diagrams onto the central screen, pointing out key features of the drone's design. "If we can master this technology, we'll have an advantage over the Vorthax. Their weapons rely on brute force, but this is precision. Efficiency. It's like comparing a sledgehammer to a scalpel." The crew listened intently, their expressions shifting between awe and apprehension. Ancient technology held immense potential, but it also came with risks. Harnessing such power required not only skill, but caution. One wrong move could lead to catastrophic consequences. "We'll need to go back," Ethan declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. "But this time we'll be ready. We'll bring heavier firepower and better defenses, and we'll move faster. We can't afford another close call." Rachel frowned, stepping forward to voice her objections. "Ethan, we barely survived the last attempt. Rushing back in without understanding what we're dealing with is reckless. What if those ruins aren't abandoned? What if whoever built them is still around?" "I hear you," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "But sitting here waiting won't get us answers. We'll take precautions, yes, but we can't let fear stop us. This is our best shot at finding something that could save us." Rachel opened her mouth to argue further but stopped herself. She trusted Ethan's judgment even if she didn't always agree with it. Instead, she focused on devising strategies to minimize the risks. "Fine," she said finally. But we do this smart. No shortcuts. If we're going back, we plan every step carefully. With Rachel's input, the team spent the next day preparing for their second attempt. Weapons were upgraded, shields reinforced, and escape routes mapped out in detail. Laura contributed by developing a prototype device capable of disrupting the drone's targeting systems. Though untested, it offered a glimmer of hope in case things went south again. When the moment came to return to the surface, the atmosphere aboard the Aegis was tense but determined. Each member of the team carried their own burdens, the weight of responsibility, the fear of failure. But they shared a common goal. They moved with purpose, their steps synchronized as they disembarked from the ship. The ruins loomed ahead, shrouded in mist and shadow. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly as though alive. Laura paused to study them, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings. "This language, it's mathematical," she murmured, snapping photos with her handheld scanner. "Whoever made this was trying to communicate not through words but through equations." "Focus, Dr. Bennett," Ethan reminded her gently. "We're here for answers, not theories." Laura nodded, snapping back to attention. "Right, let's keep moving." As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the silence became oppressive. Every sound echoed unnaturally, amplifying the sense of unease. The team stuck close together, weapons drawn, their eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The ruins twisted and turned like a labyrinth, leading them further into the heart of the ancient structure. Finally, they reached a massive chamber bathed in soft, otherworldly light. At its center stood a pedestal, atop which rested a crystalline sphere pulsating with energy. The object radiated warmth, filling the room with a gentle hum. It was beautiful and unmistakably powerful. "That's it," Laura whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "That's the source of the drone's power." Before anyone could react, the walls shifted, revealing hidden compartments filled with more drones. Their red eyes flared to life, locking onto the intruders. "Here we go again," Jake muttered, raising his weapon. "Not this time," Ethan countered, activating the prototype disruptor. A low-frequency pulse rippled through the chamber, causing the drones to falter. Their movement slowed, giving the team precious seconds to act. "Grab the artifact," Ethan shouted, covering Laura as she sprinted toward the pedestal. With careful hands, she lifted the sphere, cradling it like a fragile treasure. The moment she touched it, the entire chamber trembled, and the glow intensified. "We need to leave." "Now!" Rachel yelled, already retreating toward the exit. The team bolted, dodging collapsing debris and malfunctioning drones. Adrenaline surged through their veins as they raced back to the surface, the artifact clutched tightly in Laura's arms. When they finally burst into the sunlight, relief washed over them. But it was short-lived. Above them, the skies darkened as ominous shapes materialized. Vorthax ships descended rapidly, their weapons charging. Somehow activating the artifact had triggered a signal, one that had drawn the enemy straight to them. Ethan cursed under his breath, realizing the gravity of their situation. "Back to the ship," he ordered, ushering the team forward. "Move." They sprinted across the terrain, the roar of engines growing louder behind them. Bullets rained down, kicking up dirt and forcing them to zigzag to avoid being hit. Jake stumbled but quickly regained his footing, driven by sheer willpower. Laura clung to the artifact, refusing to let go despite the chaos around her. Reaching the Aegis, they scrambled aboard, sealing the hatch just as the first wave of Vorthax fire struck the hull. Alarms blared throughout the ship as Ethan took command. "Get us airborne full throttle," he barked, his voice cutting through the noise. The Aegis lifted off, narrowly avoiding a barrage of missiles. The crew braced themselves as the ship rocked violently, its shields straining under the assault. Through skillful maneuvering, Jake plotted a course that allowed them to slip past the enemy fleet, disappearing into the safety of space. As the immediate danger subsided, the crew gathered on the bridge, catching their breath and processing what had happened. The artifact sat securely in a containment unit, its glow dimmed but still visible. Laura stared at it, her mind racing with possibilities. What did we just bring aboard? Rachel asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. I don't know yet, Laura admitted. But whatever it is, it's powerful. And dangerous. Ethan leaned against the railing, his expression thoughtful. For now we focus on surviving. But this changes everything. If we can unlock the secrets of this artifact, we might finally have a chance against the Vorthax. Hope flickered within the crew, fragile yet persistent. They had taken a monumental risk and survived. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united by the unyielding spirit of humanity.